to panelists just also chime in on these stories that we just had, beginning with what is happening in Ethiopia and also the elections in Tunisia as well. Will we have a president, if we have a runoff, that will be also, you know, ruling the country from the prisons as well? Let's just begin with you, Ahmed Hashim.
I want to start with the last part of your news. You know, you could always hear in the Gulf that there are problems and there's confusion, and the Gulf cooperation countries are having problems.
That is Saudi Arabia.
Yes, but we could have a standout state of Kuwait, which is acting as a big brother, trying to bring people together, trying to solve the problem with Qatar and the neighbors around there. And you know, I always say, what is the impact for these things in our continent here, Debal? Qatar and Abu Dhabi and all these other Gulf states are complaining about Iranian bullying. But, you know, they do that here in the region. They're involved here in Somalia. And it's a terrible thing that they're doing that. Unlike Kuwait. Kuwait is helping quietly, slowly Kenya in its development programs. It's neutral in its issues around the region. You can see it's leading the Gulf Cooperation Council back together, which is what it should be done. So I think that the example of the state of Kuwait is very important. As far as our region is concerned, Gulf countries need to get out of this place. They need to stop fighting their proxy wars here in the Horn of Africa, and they need to follow Kuwait's example, where it helps in the economy, it helps with refugees, it helps in developmental aid, and is neutral except when trying to broker and bring people together. And I think that's very critical role that we want to have. And Debal, you know that we have an ambassador here from Kuwait who's doing a great job, Qusay Al Farhan, His Excellency Qusay Al Farhan, and those are the kind of relationships we want with the Gulf countries. We don't want relationships based on the politics of the Middle East. We want relationships based on development, relations of bringing people together, and that's what Abiy Ahmed is doing in Ethiopia. You know that in Sidamo Debal, and that's my point before I give it to our foreign relations guru here. Sidamo Debal has got a lot of groups. It's got a lot of ethnic groups, but they're Cushitic Debal. They look like me. They're tall like me. Some of them look like Midamba here. You know, the principle we have in this region is one Ethiopia. We don't want different Ethiopias. There's only one. Ethiopia is the conscience of Africa's freedom struggle. We will never accept a divided Ethiopia. Okay. So we want them to come together.
What is the sequentially, so that we don't just mix up Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, and we're all over the place? Yes, you've actually chimed in on Saudi Arabia. Yeah. We can actually just continue with the Saudi Arabia, and then we'll discuss, since we've started Saudi Arabia. Here from Dr. Hassan Khanenje.
Yeah. Well, so are we going to talk about Ethiopia again? Oh, that's it.
Let's just continue with Saudi Arabia. I said we shall talk about Ethiopia at the tail end.
Yeah. Now, they said a potential alliance by some GCC countries to counter Iran. The trouble with this, if your unity is based on your mutual hatred for one person instead of shared values, it never lasts. And it's going to be helpful for these countries to actually find a way of working together and bringing both, for instance, Qatar and Iran with the fold. The trouble is you may choose who your friend is, but as a country you don't choose your neighbors. You're stuck there. You know, Iran is not going to move away. Qatar is not going to move from where it is. And so if you have to label one person an enemy for life, and yet you literally can't operate without that enemy being in your vicinity, it becomes impossible. And one thing we have seen is just the same way the Arab League has almost never, for instance, agreed on anything. The GCC, it was simply a matter of time before they started disagreeing.
Yes.
And even the ones who are working together right now, tomorrow, trust me, they may fall out. You need certain shared, principled, common values to advance things for the good of everybody. Now, the attack on Saudi Arabia, and I did mention this at the beginning, shows the vulnerability that all of us and all countries face. Now, had this war not dragged on for a very long time, perhaps these guys would not have been able to seek advanced technologies to develop those things. And it's not just the Houthis. Hezbollah has now developed a very lethal arsenal. If there were to be another war with Israel, you're going to actually see the consequences. The last war was worse for Israel than it has ever been in terms of the soldiers they lost. And so we need to learn lessons from history. And violence is never a strategy for succeed or for success or for peace within a region or within a country. So today they're attacking oil installations. Tomorrow they're going to attack Mecca. What's going to happen? They may even attack the presidential palace because
a disaster.
Exactly, it's going to be a disaster. As in, we cannot keep playing with fire now. As far as the Horn of Africa is concerned, and Kenya, it is important that even as we deal with the countries in the Middle East, we don't let the politics affect us. The trouble is geopolitics tend to have a lot of effect on national development. In Somalia, part of our problem is actually because of the foreign powers that also have an interest in Somalia. And those are things that we need to find a way of actually stopping or at least, addressing them. Because without discussing that and without having a strategy to approach it, and we get all meshed up into this geopolitics, it's going to be extremely dangerous for the region and for us. Now, on Ethiopia.
We shall come to Ethiopia. Let's hear from Irungi Houghton, Saudi Arabia.
So maybe very quickly, I think what I'm present to really is the danger of unregulated use of drones. I mean, let me just start there, because I think, notwithstanding the complexity of the actors in the region, I think one of the things that we've said many times is that without regulating the use of military drones, you allow for very protracted wars to be waged without any accountability, and the United States is probably of this as any others. I mean, we've seen no less than 100 drone attacks in Somalia, for example, recently, with a minimum of 15 or so, I think it's 14 civilian deaths. In March, the President of the United States essentially removed any accountability of the CIA from having to report on civilian deaths. And therefore, that has given them free rein to use this technology. Now, my question is, once you give that green light to your own security forces, what capacity do you have to regulate this internationally? And I think what we're seeing now is really that the means of kind of mass violence are being democratized, if we can use a word that we were using before slightly chaotically. Let me just continue to use it that way. Has been now given to other actors, and I think that's one of the lessons from this, that the use of drones and their proliferation of that technology is now in the hands of other actors, not just the United States.
Right. Gracias, Boncha.
Middle East is caught up in a web of many issues which are unraveling at the same time. There is the Arab Spring, which never happened there, so it's still winter in the Arab Spring. I mean, in the Middle East, there is also the Kiad Sun crisis that has been taking place. There is the Palestinian issue, and to me, all these forces which are at play, and of course now there's economic war, I don't think GCC can manage this crisis, because they really be punching above their weight. And of course, as Hassan says, the Arab League is also stymied because of the paralysis on issues like Palestine and all that. So the way out is quite complicated, and now you have these proxy wars. To me, I think, and given all this new technology of fighting war, we are in for a long drawn war. And of course, we are going to see serious effect, particularly on the economy, because that is the region where a lot of ships go through. And secondly, it is also a source of a lot of energy for the rest of the world as we continue to use carbon fuels. So we are in a big quagmire, and I don't think that we have now global leadership that can solve it, because I think the Russians have seen an opportunity to assert their influence, their technology, and the Americans walked out of nuclear deal. So there is no consensus on how to approach that issue. We are in a state of flux.
We're in a flux as it is right now. Okay, Maybe also, let's just get to your introductory remarks on this, then I'll ask the question about the former, now he's the immediate former, national security advisor, and his foreign policy to the Middle East as well. Was it really, is it the one which is really causing all this trouble? Was there any clarity? Did he make any discernible difference as far as reconfiguring the foreign policy of the U.S. to the Middle East is concerned? Naomi Damba.
I think that you have to look at, take this thing from a global perspective and ask a question. What is the sense U.S. national interest right now on in the Middle East? And U.S. is now the world producer, the world highest producer of oil itself. It can sustain itself for many years using self oil. Then the second question: can the U.S. afford to have another war in the Middle East? And I don't think that is possible. The Congress will not go for it. The allies, Europe, we are not going to go for it. The UK is in a state of turmoil that will not support America right now if they try to attack Iran. Iran was contained. Iran was brought within where an area where you can discuss, where you can verify things through Obama administration. And Trump, with this national security advisor, retreated from that and created absolute chaos. Now, there was a movement to have Saudi Arabia sort of contain Iran movement around close, they say. That the question is, Saudi is not reach a state where Iran is. I raised the question, are they able to produce one tank? I know they have acquired significant sophisticated weapon, but can they manage the kind of weaponry they have acquired? Iran is able to produce its own weapon and is able to exploit openness of the Middle East right now. They are in Syria, they are in Yemen, they are in Lebanon. They're coming and surrounding the Saudi Arabia interest. And therefore, what we're looking for at this point is the killing of Khashoggi took everything, took the moral leadership, moral aptitude out of Saudi. Saudi has no ability literally to lead the Arab state. They block Qatar, which is very significant for American command center, and they have continued war going on in that place. That allow Iran to literally walk through. There is a talk of fairly unity between Iraq and Iran, and Iraq is saying that they will not join any war that started by Americans. So Americans basically left alone, and Trump will make statements, scary statement, but I don't think it's going to follow through, and I don't think the Congress will back him to do that. That is the state where they are, and this will just blow up, and another thing will come. The point is what Kanenje brought up is that the Lebanese, another conflict between Lebanon and Israel, will not go well for Israel. The situation is very, very volatile.
Right. So we have Mattis now, who has resigned as the U.S. Security Advisor, and wanted to see how was his performance, especially in light of what is happening in the Middle East, and how also the foreign policy really affected this. But we need also to pick up on what Naomi Damba has also mentioned. And we've had the clip of Donald Trump saying, we are locked and loaded, right? And this is sort of saying that we stand at the ready as far as if worst comes to worst, we can actually invade Iran as it is right now because of what they've done to Saudi Arabia. So is it a threat of war? The journalists have pushed him to the wall. They're saying, no, I'm not insinuating that. But if we say we are locked and loaded, what does that mean?
You know, one thing I really actually enjoy about Donald Trump is he makes an excellent stand-up comedian. So, and he keeps giving. So that is great. I think all of you guys here remember the little rocket man. You know, him claiming he has a bigger button, the nuclear button, and he can wipe it off the face of the earth. You know, that is Donald Trump. We kind of used to him saying that. Now, I'm not surprised that General Mattis, you know, would resign. This is the third national security advisor to resign in 3 years. It's extremely difficult to work with Donald Trump. Donald Trump, a lot of times, doesn't listen to professional advice. He acts on instinct. It's almost very, would say, primordial way of actually making decisions and policy. We know he's a little bit averse to certain risks, especially war. In an election year, you remember the campaigns are already on. He's facing not exactly a big threat internally with the Republican Party, those who are trying to run for president. But at the same time, I doubt that this current Congress will actually approve war. Europe, if there is anything coming from Europeans, including France, they're saying, well, I think you need to get back Iran back into the fold. You know, we would avoid all this. So I do not see a major war, for instance, happening. Now, if there's going to be a limited response, for instance, the trouble is right now the Iranians have little to lose. If there's going to be a response, it may interpret that as a complete declaration of war and completely try to wreak havoc. Okay, and then all of us are going to sink. So Mattis, despite his competence and his military service, you can only have so much in terms of having your way with Donald J. Trump. And a lot of military people and professionals, whether from the FBI or from the Pentagon, they've had problems, or even the CIA trying, because you remember the former FBI director, he said, you know, this guy doesn't listen, you know, to people. It doesn't matter what evidence, you know, you have. He acts, again, as I said, on instinct, and I think that's likely to continue. So in terms of assessment, with regard to his real impact on the ground, honestly, we can't tell, because Donald Trump does what Donald Trump wants to do.
So regardless of the advice that actually you'll proffer.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's hear, lastly, from Ahmed Ashi.
Well, Debala, I'm not sure if we've segued away from the American issue, but I'd like to say one thing about that. It's that right now the idea that there's no rational thinking there, I don't think it's correct. I think they know the government has been there for 200 years, and there's a bureaucracy and there's a system. The problem is the wild card at the top and the kind of decisions that he makes. But at the end of the day, the issues in the Middle East are so heavy, so huge, that the military in the United States is not going to want to go to another problem there quickly, because it's not going to be solvable. So I think that we hope for peace in the Middle East.
Right, so peace in the Middle East, but we can see also there is a Gulf Defense Cooperation talks going on.
Yeah.
We've heard also from Votel, who is the U.S. Central Command Chief in the Middle East as well. So we wanted just to find out, what is the role of Kuwait as it is? Because now it's saying Kuwait, which along with the Washington has led mediation efforts in the crisis that is happening in the Middle East, and has said it is considering U.S. proposals for a regional alliance to counter Iranian influence. So where is the pivotal role of Kuwait in this particular scenario that we're having as we're closing, or we are actually drawing this to a close?
It's an important neutral state in the Gulf. Although its interests lie completely with the Gulf countries and Saudi Arabia, it's also very close to Iran, and someone needs to come up in that Gulf Cooperation Council, a mediator who can bring a regional kind of chill out period, so that people can start talking and then solve the problem in Yemen, solve the problem between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And I think that Kuwait has done a very decent job, because it has now come out and say, look, we need to tackle this head on right now here in our area. We cannot only rely on the Americans to do it, we have to help. And I think the Gulf Cooperation Council has to come back, and that will be a multilateral place for them to try and solve their issues with Qatar, with Iran, and I think that's a very strategic role that the state of Kuwait is playing now.
It seems, Ambassador, you're actually not agreeing with Ashi.
But as I said earlier on, that you see, Kuwait can only come under the umbrella of Gulf Cooperation Council. But who are the members of Gulf Cooperation Council? You are talking of Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. Who are outside? You have Iran is outside, Yemen is out, Turkey is out, Israel is not there, Jordan is not there, Lebanon is not there. And all these are stakeholders in what is happening in that region.
So what the choice of having these particular discussions in Kuwait, how
I mean, to me,
Yes.
it's a public relations exercise.
But it's also, if I could just intervene, it's a neutral state trying to bring
That's
other
true.
states
it's actually a
together.
neutral street
But
in these,
neutral in what sense? Because if you look at even within the GCC itself, you have disagreement. I mean, Qatar and Saudi Arabia can't see eye to eye. Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. So even if you have to have stakeholders that can talk to each other.
We need to invite the ambassador to the show, Debal, so he can explain these issues to us even better.
Ambassador of Kuwait.
Yes.
Well,
but that would be a good
That would be a good thing to do.
tell us how neutral they are in all this
You know
scenario.
what's going on in the
African
region, yeah.
Yeah, the neutrality of Kuwait in all this. And for them,
I wouldn't
holding this
say they're
yes,
neutral. I would say they're trying to be impartial.
impartial.
And there's a difference because they're not exactly neutral, but I think they've been trying to be impartial. And by trying to be impartial, you start earning some confidence. That is what American administrations, for instance, previously tried to do with regard to the Middle East peace process, until then Donald Trump he completely went to the other side. Now, Kuwait, has an interesting history. We know what happened to it in 1990, 91, the invasion. Iraq is a majority Shiite country. Bahrain is a majority Shiite country. Syria, of course, majority Sunni country. Now, for it to try and balance, because it's too close, for instance, to Iraq. Right now, Tehran actually has more influence in Iraq than the United States or any other country. And part of it because of that ethnic or sectarian affiliation it has with Iran. 60% of Iraqis are Shiite Muslims. And for Kuwait to recognize that, first of all, it's a pretty small country in terms of population. It's extremely wealthy, but it's pretty small. And so you are caught between these, because if there was to be a fallout, it's actually going to suffer first, compared to these other countries. It's in a very tricky place. But by providing that platform of impartiality, it's acting again as a big brother, to the Middle East, to try to figure things out. Now, we don't know whether it's going to succeed, because if the agenda is to isolate one country, again, as I'm saying, it becomes extremely difficult. Qatar is a central part of the GCC. Okay, so you can't really discuss the unity of the GCC without, for instance, bringing back
Qatar.
Yeah, it becomes impossible. And I think this pride that some of these countries sometimes have has to be checked. They have to look at themselves in the mirror and say, what is best for all of us in the region, but not just what is best for some of us.
Right.
Correct.
Let's bring it to a close with Naomi Damba.
Well, the Gulf states are in a chaotic state right now, without a solid leader. For quite a number of years, Egypt played that role. And then Saudi Arabia was coming up, played the role. But Kuwait is it's a small little country with no muscle to organize and bring these people together. I just cannot believe that it can play that pivotal role, rather than be, they're not neutral by all means. And so they cannot play a role against the encroachment of Iran right now.
Okay. Right, let's head over now to Ethiopia. And we can see also this new development where Abiy is trying to temper the new push for a breakaway. This is happening. We discussed here, I think, the other time with the, is it the Sidima? Right?
Sidama.
Sidama community. Now we have these people also who are gagging for, their own state as well, the Kaficho ethnic group. Let's just begin with you, Hashi, on that.
There are many. There are lots of groups in Sidamo. There are many who are more than maybe the other ones. But essentially, Debal, It's like Western Kenya, you know, you have one group of people there, and that's what you have one group of people there as well. And I don't think that these things of self-determination, which were in the Ethiopian constitution, the referendums, we cannot have referendums ad infinitum in Ethiopia. I mean, there has to be a constitutional government there. There has to be a party politics, but every Tom, Dick, and Harry can't put his hand up and say we're going to separate. We know what has happened in the Sudan. South Sudan got independence, and what happened right after that? The little regions want independence. So, we want to manage these nation states. We want to manage them in a way that is a bit democratic and open. We don't want the division. We don't want the fission. We want fusion. We want to trade with Ethiopia. And you know that the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, is just fresh breath. Nothing like this happened in Ethiopia. People were quiet. The military, the TPLF was stomping their foot on all the regions. Today there is all these expressions, and he's presiding over it. He said, you could speak, you could vote, but let's keep the country together.
Right, so the federal system as it is right now, do you think it can work going forward, even under the leadership of Abiy? Ambassador?
You know, this is a pressure cooker effect now, and
pressure cooker effect.
yes.
You know, there's a cooling process also in the pressure cooker effect.
And I'm so happy to hear Ashi here use the word democracy now. but you know, Ethiopia is going through a very tricky moment, because you have on one hand a constitution that guarantees this freedom of choice and determination, self-determination. So if you are going to live by rule of the law, you have to respect what the constitution says. On the other hand, you have historical issues which have not been addressed. And these are the challenges. When issues that happen and there's no closure, they always will come back to haunt you. And then there is the third issue, that they are facing now an election next year. You don't have time to even tweak the constitution so that you can align it to new realities. So the challenge now is, do you go to an election with these formations? There are two forces that are taking place in Ethiopia. You have now what you might call ethnic-based nationalism that is agitative. And then you have the nationalists who feel Ethiopia should remain together and move forward. But these forces have got some issues that they cannot, there is no commonality on some issues. But I think probably the Prime Minister is going to navigate through, because the countries must then, the nationalists, and I agree with him, that the common wood for them to maintain peace and move towards unity and development is better than going separate ways, because it is going to be a challenge. It is also got implications on Kenya, because there are neighbors and very good neighboring. I mean, it's a country with 110 million people, which is also, which has been growing fast. And this is where, when you have a development state, as we talked earlier on, but which has lacked those fine-tuned democracy. This is the pressure cooker effect that I was talking about.
Okay, right. I think we're done with Ethiopia, unless you want to add something. What?
Yeah, of course. I didn't.
Oh, you did.
Contributions. The two of us, we have it. Well, Dibal, in state and nation making, whenever you grant rights, you must have a very clear system of managing them. Or else you find yourself leading to the rise of proto-nationalist and redentist groups. And I think that is one thing we're seeing in Ethiopia. In fact, while the return of OLF into the fold of the Ethiopian body politic was something that is extremely welcome, there is actually a lot of noise from Oromo circles that they feel the government shortchanged them. The disarmament program doesn't seem to be succeeding, at least according to lots of noises from the Oromo circles. And what we are seeing with regard to demands of certain regions being given the same rights, it's actually a manifestation of some of the internal dynamics that are happening in Ethiopia. Now, Abiy Ahmed needs to manage this transition very clearly. I think he has goodwill, but I think at the same time, he's also a little bit of hostage of some of the previous forces that, of course, are still in control in Ethiopia. And we know that is a process. In fact, that the recent assassination that we saw is also a testament to actually some of those dynamics that are happening within Ethiopia. And if this thing is not managed very carefully, we may risk catastrophe actually on the north of our border, which is going to be very dangerous. Now, as a region, as a country, I think we may need to offer, a hand of help in trying to assist them in areas we've been successful, and try to draw in other people to play a role. Ethiopia is a country with 180 million people. Those are too many, and a lot of ethnicities. And of course, the election is coming. There is no sufficient time to make amendments to the constitution, but they will need to put in place a mechanism that goes beyond the meles structure that he put in place, because it has to speak to the new Ethiopia, not the old Ethiopia.
Yes. Right. You don't hear it?
So I'm not locked and loaded on this story, so
You're not locked and loaded on the story of Ethiopia.
this is going to be our phrase for the week. I think Kenyans now will just say I'm not locked and loaded on that one. I'm flexible. But if we are going to talk about, we have a minute to talk about Tunisia. I do have a
Yes, we're headed to Tunisia right now. So are we likely to see the professor now who is in prison right now? And then there's this all debate about a runoff, and he will be in prison. If he's likely now to be elected as a president, what scenario will that be? Or now he'll have, the presidential power to
Tunisia
get himself out of.
I think Tunisia is fascinating at the moment, not just for Tunisians, but I think for the rest of us who believe in democracy. You've got three, let me just break it down very quickly. So you've got a situation where there's 15% unemployment. There is a cost of living that's going up by 30%. You have a government that is increasingly lost the confidence and the trust of the population. So the incumbent, or rather the prime minister, who is also one of the three candidates not being mentioned very much now, is very unlikely to be the next president of Tunisia. You have two candidates. One, as you say, I think his name is Karoui, although that sounds like he's from Kiambu. But and apologies to Tunisians. He's basically in prison, or rather he's in a pre-trial detention facility. He is a mogul. He controls the media houses. He's very wealthy, and for that reason has been very popular, or at least he has face recognition with many, many Tunisians. But he's in prison. The other candidate is a professor, largely conservative professor, but he has been essentially associated with the constitution making. So he's a constitutionalist. He is very popular. He's not necessarily a radical, so he believes in the death penalty. He believes in criminalizing homosexuality. He thinks that men and women who kiss in public should be arraigned under a sexual assault act that they have in place. So he's not necessarily radical progressive, but he is the front runner. And I thought, if you look at these three characters, if you can just do this for a minute, it is very much the challenge of our democracy. Governments who have lost public trust, populists who are implicated in money laundering cases and perhaps cartels of corruption, and then you have the constitutionalist that is also seeking the votes. Now, it'll be interesting to see where this goes.
Okay. Ahmed Ashi.
Well, my last comments, I think we're doing because of time. Debal, you know that I speak about Eritrea every show that we have. And today is the first year anniversary of the finance minister there, who was Berhane Abrehe, who has disappeared and I think is in jail. Countless other journalists and other people are just going to jail in that country. It's a kind of medieval politics going on there, and Amnesty International has called for the release of this people in jail, and this panel and this free press in this country and this free media that we have, we're enjoying, also calling for the release of these people, because we've been there, we know what that has cost our country, and Eritrea ought to change. That's my last point.
Right. Ambassador.
I still go back to issue of Tunisia and the statistics that was given by Irungu. If you go to the base, Tunisia is a very developed country. In fact, if you look at GDP, Tunisia is at 3,500. Kenya, we are just around less than 2,000 anyway. And so, and it has been declining for the last 10 years almost. It isn't been growing. Yet, at 3,000 plus, they had this tragedy. What informed this strategy? A lot of studies that have been done have discovered one thing, and this is what he pointed to. Even if you have growth, if it is not inclusive, you still are at the edge. And what it tells us, you must always carry the entire society with you, and where perhaps some people are being left behind, then you must have safety nets to take care of them. And you remember this crisis started with that young man in the street who set himself on fire, and Tunisia has never recovered.
With the self-immolation. Yes. All right, we just read some of our tweets that we have here as we're winding up. We have Danny Berry saying the rise of Trumpism, the bag of nationalism and general mistrust among nations is a solid indicator that no country has achieved consolidated democracy. He's reading Larry Diamond there, or read Larry Diamond. Africa should create an African democracy that is respects values and history and ambitions. Also, we have Omondi saying that international relations are about perception. The biggest boy on the block, Donald Trump, will always project his interest in the Middle East and in play, or that is Stephen Wald's structural realist in play. Kuwait is a small fish. We have also Mohammed saying that we ran chasing that prosperity to where it went. Now they're chasing us back, fighting and building the narrative that this open society thing doesn't work. What goes around comes around. This is what Mohammed is saying. We have also Nderitu saying, what if it's Saudi Arabia responsible for the attack? We all know they murdered Khashoggi. So what wouldn't they do to heighten the tension between Iran and the rest of the world? That is another angle to it as well. And Moni as well is saying the problem of democracy starts when the majority of your panel projects democracy as the ideal, that human nature is good. They should start from Irungi Houghton's point. It's just another form of government, plus it could be worse. This is what Omondi Okwani is saying. Your closing remarks, Irungu, are also Dr. Hassan Khanenje and Professor Naomi Damba.
So very quickly, one of the stories in the newspapers today is about these two gentlemen, or these two men that have been arraigned in court half naked. And they are concerned about what's happening at Kamkunji police station. We've also received as Amnesty a number of complaints about the police station, and I think if the Inspector General is watching, or the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, or even the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, I think there needs to be a bit of attention to that police station. I mean, there's talks of hundreds of young people being arrested and essentially not being released unless they are bribes. Many of these are petty offences, and